We have decided to cut off all contact. Stay away forever. My mother's words. Below it, a red heart emoji from my sister Chloe, mocking me with its cruelty. But that was not what made my knees buckle. It was what I discovered next, buried in my laptop, hidden in plain sight for 3 years. My bank statements showed automatic withdrawals I never authorized. $400 every month for my parents' mortgage. $640 for Chloe's luxury SUV. Payments I thought were my student loans were actually feeding their lives while mine starved. $35,000. Gone. Stolen by the people who were supposed to love me. If you have ever been betrayed by your own family, if you have ever discovered the people you trusted most were using you, hit that like button right now. This story gets darker before the sunrise breaks through, but stay with me. Drop a comment if you have ever had to choose between blood and survival because what happened next changed everything. Let me take you back 6 days to the night that shattered my world. The graduation party my family threw for me in our small Idaho town should have been a celebration. I had just finished my degree in business administration from Boise State, the first person in our family to graduate from a 4-year university. I had spent the entire day baking the 3-layer vanilla cake with buttercream frosting, hanging the silver and gold streamers across the living room ceiling, arranging the folding chairs in neat rows across the backyard. Mom said she wanted to make it special for me, but when I offered to help, she waved me off. "You just focus on being the star tonight, Daisy," she said, using my childhood nickname that I had long since abandoned. By 7 in the evening, the house was full of relatives and neighbors, their voices bouncing off the walls in cheerful chaos. The string lights I had hung created a warm glow across the patio, and the playlist I had carefully curated hummed softly in the background. But as I moved through the crowd in my new navy dress, the one I had saved 3 months to buy, I felt like a ghost drifting through someone else's celebration. Every conversation I tried to join seemed to pivot away from me. Aunt Margaret wanted to talk about Chloe's promotion at the salon. Uncle Frank was more interested in discussing Daniel's basketball team with my father. Even the neighbors seemed more excited about asking Mom for her famous pot roast recipe than congratulating me. The cake I had spent 4 hours decorating sat on a corner table pushed back to make room for the gift table, which was piled high with presents wrapped in silver paper. I should have known something was wrong when I realized none of those gifts had my name on them. They all said, "For Ethan," or "To our favorite grandson." My 10-year-old nephew Ethan had been running wild all evening, his high-pitched laughter cutting through every conversation like a siren. He was Chloe's son, and in my mother's eyes, he could do no wrong. I had watched him knock over a vase of flowers, spill juice across the hardwood floor, and pull the tablecloth halfway off the dessert table, and each time, Mom just laughed and called him spirited. I was standing near the cake, trying to work up the courage to suggest we start cutting it so people could eat before leaving when Ethan came running up to me. His face was flushed with excitement, and there was a mean glint in his eyes that I had seen too many times before. He was the kind of child who had learned early that cruelty could be entertaining if the right audience was watching. "Hey, Aunt Daisy," he said loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "Mom says you only got that degree to show off. She says it is not like you are going to use it for anything important." The conversations around us stuttered to a halt. I felt my face burn as several heads turned in our direction. I tried to smile to brush it off as a child not understanding what he was saying, but Ethan was not finished. "Grandma said college is wasted on people who do not know what to do with their lives. Are you one of those people, Aunt Daisy?" The laughter started small, a few nervous chuckles from the relatives who did not know how to respond to a child repeating adult cruelty. But then I heard my mother's voice, loud and bright, cutting through the awkwardness with a laugh that felt like broken glass in my ears. She was standing with a group of her friends near the patio door, and her laughter gave everyone else permission to join in. The sound swelled around me, dozens of people laughing at the humiliation of a 24-year-old woman who had worked 2 jobs to put herself through school. Chloe stood beside Mom, her hand covering her mouth in a gesture that might have looked sympathetic if not for the satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. She had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose mistakes were always forgiven and whose successes were always celebrated. My achievements had always been footnotes to her stories. I felt something hard and cold settle in my chest, a weight that made it difficult to breathe. I looked across the room at my father, hoping for some kind of intervention, some acknowledgement that what was happening was wrong. But Daniel just sat in his lawn chair, his eyes fixed on his phone screen, his thumb scrolling through what I assumed was a football game recap. He had perfected the art of being present without actually being there. Ethan was not done with his performance. He stepped closer to the cake table, his eyes locked on mine with the kind of calculated cruelty that only children raised without consequences can master. Before I could react, before anyone could stop him, he reached out with both hands and shoved the cake hard off the table. The sound of the ceramic plate shattering against the hardwood floor was impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Buttercream frosting exploded across the floor in white and yellow streaks, pieces of vanilla cake scattering like confetti. The carefully piped roses I had spent an hour creating were now just smears of color against the dark wood. Ethan stood over the wreckage, his chest puffed out with pride, and said in a voice that carried to every corner of the room, "Eat it, Aunt Daisy! Eat your cake off the floor!" The silence that followed was worse than the laughter had been. It was the silence of complicity of dozens of people choosing in that moment to look away, to pretend they had not seen, to decide that intervening would be more uncomfortable than watching a young woman be humiliated at her own graduation party. And then my mother laughed again. It was not the nervous laughter of someone trying to diffuse tension. It was genuine amusement, the kind of laugh that said she found the whole scene delightful. Chloe joined in, and soon other voices followed, a cascade of laughter that felt like a physical assault. I stood there, my hands clenched so tightly at my sides that my nails cut into my palms. I had been holding a cake knife preparing to cut slices for everyone, and I realized I was gripping it so hard that my knuckles had turned white. For just a moment, I imagined what it would feel like to throw that knife to Scream, to make them understand how much they had hurt me. But I knew it would not matter. They would find a way to make it my fault, to say I was overreacting, to tell the story later as proof that I was unstable. So instead, I set the knife down gently on the table. I untied the apron I had been wearing all evening, the one with little cupcakes printed on it that Mom had given me last Christmas. I folded it carefully and placed it beside the knife. Then I turned and walked toward the front door, my new shoes crunching on pieces of broken plate. Behind me, the laughter continued. No one called my name. No one asked me to stay. No one apologized. I drove through the Idaho darkness for hours, the yellow lines on the highway blurring together as my mind replayed the scene over and over. I had left my hometown at 19 to build a life in Seattle, promising myself that distance would make things better, that if I just worked hard enough and proved myself valuable enough, my family would finally see me. But tonight had shattered that illusion as completely as Ethan had shattered that plate. When I finally pulled into the parking garage of my small studio apartment in Capitol Hill, it was past 2 in the morning. Seattle was quiet in the way only a city can be at that hour. The usual traffic noise reduced to the occasional rumble of a truck on the highway. I sat in my car for a long time, too exhausted to cry, too angry to feel anything but a cold, clarifying rage. That was when my phone buzzed with my mother's text message. I had been hoping, despite everything, that someone would reach out to apologize, to check if I had made it home safely, to acknowledge that what happened was wrong. Instead, I got a message that felt like a door slamming in my face. "We have decided to cut off all contact. Stay away forever." The red heart from Chloe appeared seconds later, and I knew it was intentional. It was her way of twisting the knife, of making sure I knew this decision was unanimous, that I was not being rejected by one person, but by everyone who was supposed to love me. I sat there in my car staring at those messages, and something fundamental shifted inside me. The old Harper, the one who had spent her whole life trying to earn her family's approval, trying to be useful enough to be loved, died in that moment. What rose in her place was someone harder, someone who was done being a doormat, someone who was ready to fight back. I went inside and opened my laptop, my hands steady now with purpose. I pulled up my online banking and started going through my transaction history, something I had been too busy to check carefully for months. My job as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup kept me working 60-hour weeks, and I had fallen into the habit of just glancing at my account balance to make sure I was not overdrafting. But now, with the clarity that comes from having nothing left to lose, I started examining every automatic withdrawal. Student loan payment, $400. That made sense. Rent, $1,200. Yes. Utilities, groceries, car insurance, phone bill. All normal. But then I saw two recurring payments I did not recognize. One to Wells Fargo Home Mortgage for $400 and one to Capital One Auto Finance for $640. My chest tightened as I clicked into the details. The mortgage payment had started 3 years ago, right after I got my first real job out of college. The auto loan had started 6 months later. Both were listed as co-signer payments, which meant I was not the primary borrower, but I was legally responsible if the primary borrower defaulted. I opened a new tab and pulled up my old email account, the one I rarely used anymore, and started searching. It did not take long to find what I was looking for. 3 years ago, my mother had sent me a series of emails about helping the family and being part of something bigger. She had explained that she and Dad were refinancing the house to pay off some old debt, and that having me as a co-signer would help them get a better interest rate. "You will not have to pay anything," she had promised. "We just need your signature to show the bank we have family support." 6 months later, Chloe had sent similar emails about wanting to upgrade to a safer vehicle now that she had Ethan. "I know you care about your nephew's safety," she had written. "All I need is for you to co-sign so I can get approved. I make all the payments myself, but they want to see someone with better credit backing me up." I had believed them. I had wanted so badly to be part of the family, to be someone they could rely on to prove that my college education and steady job made me valuable to them. So I had signed the papers they sent me, barely reading the fine print, trusting that they would keep their word. But they had not kept their word. From the very beginning, those payments had been coming out of my account. $12,480 over 3 years for the mortgage, $23,040 for the car. I had paid $35,520 for a house I did not live in and a car I did not drive, while my family treated me like I was worthless. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was pure and clean and absolutely certain. I opened a new text message and added my mother, father, sister, and even Ethan's father, a man named Marcus who had left Chloe when Ethan was 2 but still came around for family events. I typed slowly, making sure every word was exactly what I meant to say. "By 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, my name will be removed from every loan, mortgage, and financial agreement you have involved me in. If you want to keep your house and your car, you better figure out how to make those payments yourselves. I am done being your ATM." I hit send and turned off my phone. The silence that followed was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a bomb that had just been dropped with the explosion yet to come. I barely slept that night. I kept my phone off, knowing that turning it on would mean facing a barrage of messages, calls, and voicemails that would try to manipulate me back into compliance. Instead, I spent the hours before dawn researching my legal options, printing out bank statements, and gathering every email and text message that proved I had been deceived. At 8:30 in the morning, I walked into the Green First Bank branch in downtown Seattle. The building was modern glass and steel, with that hushed professional atmosphere that made you feel like money was being treated with the seriousness it deserved. I had called ahead and made an appointment with a loan specialist, a man named Mr. Davies, who had worked in banking for over 20 years. He was waiting for me in a small office with a window overlooking Pike Street. He was in his late 50s with gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, and he had the kind of calm, competent demeanor that made you feel like your problems could be solved. "Ms. Wilson," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk, "you mentioned on the phone that you need to discuss your status as a co-signer on 2 loans." I sat down and pulled out the folder I had prepared, laying out printed bank statements, email chains, and loan documents across his desk. "I was fraudulently added as a co-signer," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "I was told I would not be responsible for payments, but I have been making every payment for 3 years. I want my name removed from both loans immediately." Mr. Davies picked up his reading glasses and began going through my documents carefully. His expression did not change as he read, but I saw his jaw tighten slightly when he reached the email from my mother, promising I would not have to pay. "Ms. Wilson," he said after several minutes, "you are not the first person to come to me with this kind of situation. Family members coercing relatives into co-signing loans with false promises is more common than you might think." He pulled up his computer and began typing, pulling up the mortgage and auto loan accounts. "I see here that you have been making consistent payments on both accounts. The primary borrowers, Linda and Daniel Wilson for the mortgage and Chloe Martinez for the auto loan, have not made a single payment themselves." The confirmation of what I already knew still hit me like a punch to the stomach. They had never intended to pay. From the very beginning, they had planned to use me. "What are my options?" I asked. Mr. Davies folded his hands on the desk. "Legally, as a co-signer, you are responsible for the debt if the primary borrower does not pay. However, given that you were fraudulently induced to sign, and given that you have documented proof that you were misled about the terms, you may have grounds to have your name removed. I will need to send this to our legal department, but I want you to know that we take fraud very seriously." He paused, studying me carefully. "I have to ask, though, are you prepared for the consequences? If we remove you as a co-signer and the primary borrowers cannot make the payments, those loans will go into default. The house could be foreclosed. The car could be repossessed." I met his eyes without flinching. "They cut me off last night. Told me to stay away forever. After 3 years of secretly taking my money after humiliating me at my own graduation party, they threw me away like garbage. So, yes, Mr. Davies, I am prepared for the consequences. They made their choice. Now I am making mine." He nodded slowly, and I saw something like respect in his expression. "Then let me make some calls. Have a seat in the waiting area. This might take a couple of hours." I spent those hours in a state of surreal calm, watching people come and go from the bank, conducting their ordinary financial business while my entire world was being reconstructed. I checked my phone once during that time, turning it on, just long enough to see that I had 73 missed calls and over 200 text messages. I did not read any of them. I just turned the phone off again. At 11:15, Mr. Davies came out to get me. "Ms. Wilson, please come back to my office." When I sat down, he slid a set of documents across the desk to me. "Our legal department has reviewed your case and agreed that there is sufficient evidence of fraudulent inducement. We are processing an immediate removal of your cosigner status on both loans effective today. You will no longer be legally responsible for either debt." The relief that washed over me was so intense that I felt dizzy. What happens now? The primary borrowers will be notified that they are now solely responsible for the full payment amounts. They will need to refinance or find another cosigner if they want to keep their interest rates. If they cannot make the payments, standard default procedures will apply. He paused. "I imagine you will be receiving some very angry phone calls." I signed the papers, each signature feeling like cutting through a rope that had been strangling me. When the final document was notarized and stamped, the sound of the stamp hitting the paper echoed in the small office like a declaration of independence. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "Thank you for standing up for yourself," Mr. Davies replied. "Not everyone has that courage." I left the bank and walked through downtown Seattle, the December air cold and crisp against my face. I stopped at a coffee shop and bought myself an expensive latte, something I rarely did because I was always trying to save money. But today felt different. Today felt like the first day of a life that actually belonged to me. I turned my phone back on and watched as the notifications flooded in, hundreds of them, each one more desperate and angry than the last. I did not read them. I did not need to. Instead, I opened my text messaging app and sent one more message to the family group chat. "It is done. I am free. If any of you show up at my apartment or try to contact me at work, I will call the police and file for a restraining order. You wanted me gone. Congratulations, you got your wish." The responses came immediately, but I had already silenced the conversation. I could see the messages piling up, but I did not read them. There was nothing they could say that would change my mind. Nothing they could promise that I would believe. 3 days later, they showed up anyway. I was in my apartment on a Friday evening finishing up some work emails and planning to meet my friends Riley and Jordan for dinner when my intercom buzzed insistently. I looked at the video screen and saw my mother and sister standing in the lobby, their faces red and furious even through the grainy security footage. My first instinct was to ignore them to pretend I was not home. But I knew they would not leave. They would stand there buzzing every apartment until someone let them in, or they would wait for another resident to enter and slip in behind them. I had seen my mother use that tactic before when she wanted to get into a building. I picked up my phone and opened the voice recorder app, hitting the red record button. Then I pressed the intercom button. "Harper!" My mother's voice came through the speaker shrill with rage. "Open this door right now! What the hell did you do to the bank? You need to leave," I said calmly into the intercom. "I told you not to contact me." "You destroyed us." Chloe's voice joined in, and I could hear she was crying. "The bank froze Mom and Dad's account. They are talking about foreclosure. My car is going to be repossessed. You did this. You ruined everything." "I did not ruin anything," I said. "I stopped letting you ruin me." "Harper Wilson, you opened this goddamn door." My mother was screaming now, and I could see other residents in the lobby starting to stare. "You are my daughter. You do not get to just cut us off. We are your family." "Family does not steal from each other," I replied. "Family does not lie and manipulate and humiliate. You wanted me gone. I am gone. Now leave or I am calling the police." "You would not dare," my mother hissed. I ended the intercom call and immediately dialed 911. When the operator answered, I spoke clearly and calmly. "This is Harper Wilson at the Cedar Heights Apartments on Broadway. 2 individuals are in my building lobby refusing to leave after I have asked them to. They are harassing me through the intercom system. I would like to report trespassing." The operator asked me a few questions, confirmed my address, and told me officers were being dispatched. The whole call took less than 3 minutes. When I looked back at the intercom screen, I could see my mother and Chloe were still there now, arguing with each other while other residents gave them a wide berth. 10 minutes later, 2 Seattle police officers arrived. I watched on the intercom screen as they approached my mother and sister, their body language professional but firm. I could not hear what was being said, but I could see my mother gesturing wildly, pointing up at the building, her mouth moving rapidly as she tried to explain her side. One of the officers, a tall woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, held up a hand and said something that made my mother stop mid-sentence. Then she turned and pressed the intercom button for my apartment. "Ms. Wilson, this is Officer Martinez with the Seattle Police Department. Can you confirm that you want these individuals to leave the building?" I pressed the button to respond. "Yes, officer. I have asked them multiple times not to contact me. They showed up here despite my clear instructions to stay away." "Understood. We will escort them out." I watched as the officers guided my mother and sister toward the door. My mother was still talking, still gesturing, still trying to make them understand that I was the villain in this story. But the officers were not interested in family drama. They were interested in property rights and clear legal boundaries. At the door, my mother turned back one last time and looked directly at the camera. Even through the grainy video, I could see the hatred in her eyes. It was not the wounded look of a mother who had lost a daughter. It was the fury of someone who had lost control over a possession. When they were finally gone, I sank down onto my couch, my legs shaking with adrenaline. I saved the audio recording from my phone, naming the file Boundary, April 17, 2025. Then I sent a copy to my email and backed it up to the cloud. If they ever tried to claim I had been the aggressor, if they ever tried to paint me as the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family, I had proof of what really happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Still on for dinner, Jordan is already at the restaurant and he ordered the cheese bread." I smiled, surprised that I still could. "On my way," I typed back. "I have a story to tell you." That night, sitting in a warm booth at our favorite Italian restaurant with my 2 best friends, I told them everything. Riley and Jordan had been my roommates in college, the family I had chosen, rather than the one I had been born into. They listened without interrupting, their faces shifting from shock to anger to fierce protectiveness. "You did the right thing," Riley said when I finished. She was a social worker and she had seen countless cases of family exploitation. "What they did to you was financial abuse." You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Jordan, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm downtown, was more practical. Do you think they will try to sue you? Let them try, I said, and I meant it. I have documentation of everything. I have emails where they promised I would not have to pay. I have bank statements showing I made every payment for 3 years. I have the recording from tonight where they admitted the house and car are theirs, not mine. If they want to take this to court, I will bury them. The anger in my own voice surprised me. The old Harper would have been terrified of conflict, would have apologized and tried to smooth things over. But the new Harper, the one who had been forged in the fire of that graduation party and the cold realization of betrayal, was done, apologizing for taking up space. 2 weeks passed. My phone eventually stopped ringing with calls from my family, though my mother made one last attempt to manipulate me through Facebook. She posted a long, rambling status about ungrateful children and family betrayal, carefully worded to sound like she was the victim. When you raise a child and sacrifice everything for them, you never expect them to turn around and destroy your life, she wrote. Some people are so selfish that they will ruin their own family for money. Praying for those who have forgotten what family means. The post got dozens of sympathetic comments from relatives and family friends who did not know the full story, all of them expressing shock and disappointment in the unnamed, ungrateful child. My aunt posted a Bible verse about honoring your parents. A cousin wrote that young people today had no respect for their elders. I could have let it stand. I could have taken the high road and stayed silent, letting them control the narrative. But I was done protecting their reputation at the expense of my truth. Instead, I sent a professional email to my colleagues at work, the same people who were connected with me on social media. Dear team, I wrote, you may see some posts online regarding a family matter. Please know that I have recently had to establish firm boundaries with relatives who have been engaging in financial exploitation. If you see rumors or negative posts about me, please disregard them. I appreciate your professionalism and respect for my privacy during this time. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, I had supportive messages from coworkers, many of them sharing their own stories of family estrangement and the courage it took to walk away from toxicity. My manager, a woman named Patricia, who had always been fair and supportive, called me into her office. I saw your email, she said. I want you to know that what you are dealing with is more common than you think, and it takes real strength to set those boundaries. If you need any time off or support, just let me know. I thanked her, feeling a warmth in my chest that I had not felt in years. This was what real support looked like. This was what it meant to be seen and valued. 3 days after my mother's Facebook post, it disappeared. I never found out if she deleted it herself or if enough people who knew the truth had challenged her on it. Either way, the silence that followed was deafening. A month passed, then 2. I threw myself into my work, earning praise from clients and a small promotion at the office. I spent weekends hiking in the Cascades with Riley and Jordan, exploring the farmers markets in Capitol Hill, taking a pottery class just because I had always wanted to try it. I started therapy with a counselor who specialized in family trauma, and slowly, painfully, I began to understand that what I had experienced was not normal family conflict, but systematic abuse. You were their scapegoat, my therapist explained during one session. Every family system needs someone to blame when things go wrong, and you filled that role. The fact that you were also their financial support made you even more valuable to them, but only as a resource, not as a person. It was validating and heartbreaking at the same time, understanding that I had never really been loved by them, only used. 6 months after I walked out of that graduation party, I was sitting in my apartment on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee and reading a book when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost did not answer it, but something made me pick up. "Is this Harper Wilson?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Detective Miller. I am a private investigator. Your sister Chloe hired me to look into your financial situation." My blood ran cold. "Excuse me?" "She wanted me to find evidence that you have been stealing from your family," he continued. "But after reviewing the documents she provided along with some research of my own, I felt obligated to contact you directly. Ms. Wilson, I want you to know that the story she told me does not match the evidence." In fact, the evidence clearly shows that you were the victim of financial exploitation, not the perpetrator. I sat down heavily on my couch. Why are you telling me this? Because I have seen too many cases where family members try to use the legal system to continue abusing their victims, he said. Your sister wanted me to build a case against you, but I cannot in good conscience participate in what appears to be ongoing harassment. I am going to decline her case and recommend she seek legal counsel if she wants to pursue this further, but I wanted to warn you that she might not stop here. What should I do? Document everything, he said. Every text, every email, every attempt at contact. If she escalates, you may need a restraining order. And if it makes you feel any better, when I pointed out to her that the evidence actually supported your version of events, she hung up on me. After that call, I contacted a lawyer, a woman named Sarah Chin, who specialized in family law and harassment cases. She reviewed my documentation and agreed to take my case on retainer just in case things escalated. You have been incredibly smart about this, she told me. The fact that you have documented everything, that you have audio recordings and email trails, puts you in a very strong position. If they try to sue you or claim you owe them money, we can shut that down quickly. The knowledge that I had legal protection gave me a sense of security I had not felt in months. I was not powerless anymore. I was not alone. 9 months after the graduation party, on a cold January evening, I received a text from a number I did not recognize. When I opened it, I saw it was from Chloe. Harper, I am sorry for everything. I know I messed up. Can we talk? I stared at that message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. A part of me, the part that still remembered being kids together, sharing a bedroom, and whispering secrets in the dark, wanted to respond. Wanted to believe that maybe finally she understood what she had done. But I had learned something important over the past 9 months. An apology without change is just manipulation. And a single text message after months of silence, after hiring a private investigator to try to find dirt on me after watching her son humiliate me while she laughed, was not enough. I set my phone down without responding. I did not block her number. I did not send an angry message back. I simply chose not to engage, because the most powerful thing I had learned was this. I did not owe anyone my time, my energy, or my forgiveness, not even family. Especially not family who had proven over and over that they saw me as a resource rather than a person. A year after my graduation party, I was promoted to senior marketing coordinator. My boss praised my leadership skills and my ability to stay calm under pressure. I had my own office with a window overlooking the city, and I had finally saved enough to move to a larger apartment, a 1-bedroom with hardwood floors and a kitchen where I could actually cook. I celebrated my 25th birthday with Riley and Jordan at a rooftop bar in Capitol Hill, the city lights spreading out below us like a carpet of stars. We toasted to friendship, to survival, to the courage it takes to walk away from people who do not deserve you. You know what I am most proud of, Riley said, raising her glass. You did not just walk away. You walked toward something better. You built a life that actually makes you happy. She was right. My life now, this life without my family, was fuller and richer than anything I had known before. I had friends who actually cared about me. I had a job where I was valued. I had hobbies and interests that I pursued just because they brought me joy, not because they made me useful to someone else. I was not the girl who baked a cake for her own party and then watched it get destroyed. I was not the silent daughter who absorbed abuse to keep the peace. I was Harper Wilson, a woman who had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. On the anniversary of that graduation party, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at Lake Union, watching the sailboats drift across the water in the late afternoon sun. The sky was that particular shade of Seattle gray blue that meant rain was coming, but for now the world was peaceful. I thought about that night, about the cake on the floor, and the laughter that followed me out the door. I thought about the text messages and the confrontation in my lobby and all the ways my family had tried to drag me back into their dysfunction. And I realized something important. I did not hate them anymore. I did not love them either. I just did not think about them very much at all. That was real freedom. Not the dramatic moment of walking away, but the quiet morning months later when you realize you have not thought about them in days. When their opinions no longer echo in your head. when you can make decisions based on what you want rather than what will keep the peace. I picked up my phone and opened the Notes app where I had been keeping a journal of sorts, documenting my healing journey. I typed out a new entry. Today marks 1 year since the worst and best night of my life. The night I learned that the people who raised me never really saw me as a daughter, only as a resource. But also the night I started to see myself clearly for the first time. I am not broken because they could not love me properly. They are broken because they confused control with love, obligation with relationship, and utility with value. I am whole. I am free. I am finally home. I saved the entry and looked back out the window. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the water. Somewhere in Idaho, my mother was probably cooking dinner in a house she could barely afford. My sister was probably fighting with her boyfriend about money, while Ethan ran wild learning all the wrong lessons about how to treat people. My father was probably sitting in front of the television avoiding conflict like he had avoided it my entire life. And I was here in a city I loved, living a life I had built with my own hands, surrounded by people who actually cared about me. I had not just survived my family, I had transcended them. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. "Movie night at my place. Riley is bringing snacks. Get over here." I smiled and grabbed my jacket. As I locked my apartment door behind me, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked different than I had a year ago, stronger, more confident. There was a lightness in my eyes that had not been there before, the look of someone who had put down a weight they had been carrying for too long. The elevator ride down felt symbolic somehow, a descent from the old life into the new one. When I stepped out into the cool Seattle evening, the air smelled like rain and possibility. I walked down Broadway toward Jordan's apartment, passing the coffee shops and bookstores and restaurants that had become my new landmarks, the markers of a life that actually belonged to me. At a crosswalk waiting for the light to change, I thought about all the people who might be going through what I went through. The ones who are still making payments on loans they did not know they were responsible for. The ones who are still showing up to family events where they are treated like servants rather than relatives. The ones who are still waiting for an apology that will never come. Still hoping that if they just try hard enough, sacrifice enough, prove themselves valuable enough, they will finally be loved the way they deserve. I wanted to reach through time and space and tell them what I learned, that you cannot earn love from people who see you as a tool, that family is supposed to be a soft place to land, not a battlefield where you are always losing, that walking away is not giving up, it is growing up, it is choosing yourself when no one else will. The light changed and I crossed the street, my footsteps confident on the damp pavement. Behind me was everything I had lost. Ahead of me was everything I had gained, and for the first time in my life I knew which direction I wanted to walk. 2 years after the graduation party, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my father, his handwriting shaky on the envelope. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a short note on lined paper, the kind you tear out of a spiral notebook. "Harper," it read, "your mother and I are getting divorced. The house is in foreclosure. Chloe moved back in with us, but she is leaving now too. Everything fell apart after you left. I know you will not believe me, but I am sorry. I should have stood up for you. I should have been a better father. I do not expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About all of it. I hope you are doing well. Dad." I read the letter 3 times, waiting to feel something. Vindication, maybe. Or sadness. Or even anger. But all I felt was a distant sort of sympathy, the way you might feel reading about a natural disaster in a country you have never visited. It was sad that their lives had fallen apart, but it was not my responsibility to fix it. It had never been my responsibility. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a box in my closet, along with all the other documentation from that chapter of my life. The bank papers, the email printouts, the recording from the night they showed up at my apartment. I kept it all not because I was dwelling on it, but because I knew my own history now. I knew what I had survived and what I had overcome. I did not respond to my father's letter. Maybe that made me cruel. Maybe it made me cold. Or maybe it just made me someone who had learned that closure does not always come from other people. Sometimes you have to create it yourself by simply deciding that a chapter is finished and closing the book. 3 years after the graduation party, I was recruited by a major marketing firm in Seattle, one of the best in the Pacific Northwest. The salary they offered was more than double what I had been making with benefits that included professional development funds and 4 weeks of paid vacation. When I accepted the position, my new boss, a woman named Michelle, who had built her career from the ground up, shook my hand and said, "I can tell you are someone who knows how to set boundaries and prioritize what matters. That is exactly the kind of leadership we need here." I thought about how ironic it was that the qualities that made me successful in my career were the same ones that had gotten me labeled as selfish and ungrateful by my family. The ability to say no, the willingness to walk away from bad situations, the understanding that my time and energy were valuable and should not be given away freely to people who would not appreciate them. On my first day at the new job, I updated my emergency contact information. Where it asked for next of kin, I wrote Riley's name and number. Where it asked for relationship, I wrote chosen family. That same year, I met someone. His name was Alex, and he worked as a software engineer at a startup in South Lake Union. We met at a networking event that Jordan had dragged me to, and we bonded over our mutual love of hiking and our shared experience of having complicated family situations. "My parents cut me off when I came out as bisexual," he told me on our third date as we sat on a bench overlooking the Puget Sound. It took me a long time to understand that their rejection was about their limitations, not my worth. "I get that," I said. And I told him my story, the abbreviated version, the one I had gotten good at telling without falling apart. He listened without judgment, and when I finished, he took my hand. The people who are supposed to love us can hurt us the most, but they also teach us what we will not tolerate. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. We took things slow. I had learned to be careful with trust, to watch for red flags, to pay attention to actions rather than words. But Alex was patient and consistent. He showed up when he said he would. He respected my boundaries. He never tried to push me to reconcile with my family or suggested that blood was thicker than water. A year into our relationship, we moved in together, finding a 2-bedroom apartment in Fremont with a view of the Ship Canal. It was the first time I had ever lived with a partner, and I was terrified that I would somehow mess it up, that all my family baggage would poison this good thing I had found. But Alex was not my family. He did not expect me to be useful or convenient or constantly proving my worth. He just wanted me to be myself. We split bills fairly. We took turns cooking. We had disagreements and worked through them like adults with words instead of manipulation or silent treatment. One night, about 6 months after we moved in together, we were cooking dinner together in our small kitchen. Alex was chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, while I prepared rice and the radio was playing softly in the background. It was such an ordinary moment, so completely unremarkable, and I found myself crying. "Hey, what is wrong?" Alex asked immediately, putting down his knife and turning to me with concern. "Nothing is wrong," I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "That is what is so strange. Nothing is wrong. This is just nice." And I spent so much of my life in situations where nothing was ever just nice. There was always tension or obligation or some expectation I was failing to meet. And now I am standing in my own kitchen in my own home with someone who actually loves me, and it is just nice. He pulled me into a hug, and I let myself lean into him, let myself be vulnerable in a way I never could have been before. "You deserve nice," he said. "You deserve a whole life full of nice, boring, ordinary moments where nothing is wrong." 4 years after the graduation party, Riley got married to her partner Emma in a small ceremony at a winery in Woodinville. I was the maid of honor, and I gave a speech about chosen family and the people who show up for you when your blood relatives do not. There was not a dry eye in the room, including mine. At the reception, as I watched Riley and Emma dance their first dance as a married couple, Jordan appeared beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. "To the family we choose," he said, handing me a glass. "To the family we choose," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. 5 years after the graduation party, on a random Tuesday in March, I was working from home when my phone rang with yet another unknown number. I had stopped answering those years ago, but for some reason on this particular day, I picked up. "Hello. Is this Harper Wilson?" A woman's voice, professional and unfamiliar. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Jennifer Park. I am an estate attorney. I am calling about your grandmother, Dorothy Wilson. I am sorry to inform you that she passed away last week." My grandmother. My father's mother, who I had not spoken to in over 5 years, who had taken my mother's side in the family schism without ever hearing mine. "I am sorry to hear that." I said, and I meant it. Death was sad even when the relationship was complicated. "Your grandmother named you in her will," Jennifer continued. "She left you a letter and a small inheritance. Would you be willing to meet with me to discuss the details?" I met Jennifer at her office in downtown Seattle 2 days later. She was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She handed me an envelope with my name written on it in my grandmother's spidery handwriting. "Your grandmother changed her will about a year ago," Jennifer explained. "She left you $50,000 and asked me to give you this letter. The rest of her estate was divided among her other grandchildren." I opened the letter with shaking hands. Inside was a single page filled with my grandmother's handwriting. "Dearest Harper," it began. "By the time you read this, I will be gone. I want you to know that I am proud of you. Your Aunt Margaret finally told me the truth about what happened, about how your mother and sister treated you, about the money they took from you. I am ashamed that I believed their lies for so long. I am ashamed that I did not reach out to you to hear your side of the story. You were always the strong one, the one who did not need anyone, and we took advantage of that. I hope this money will help you build the life you deserve. I hope you are happy. I hope you have found people who love you the way you should have been loved all along. You do not owe your family anything, Harper. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not even this letter. But I wanted you to know that at least one person in this family finally sees you clearly. With love and regret, Grandma Dorothy." I sat in that office and cried for the first time in years, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of being seen, even if it came too late, even if it came after everything was already over. "Are you all right?" Jennifer asked gently, offering me a box of tissues. "I am," I said, and I meant it. "Thank you for giving me this. I used part of my grandmother's inheritance to pay off the last of my student loans. I donated some of it to a nonprofit that helped victims of financial abuse, and I saved the rest a cushion of security that felt like my grandmother's final gift her way of saying she was sorry for not standing up for me when it mattered. 6 years after the graduation party, Alex proposed to me on a hiking trail in the North Cascades, with wildflowers blooming around us and mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. It was perfect, which is to say, it was ours uncontaminated by anyone else's expectations or demands. We planned a small wedding at a botanical garden in Seattle, inviting only the people who had been there for us, who had supported us, who actually cared about our happiness. Riley and Jordan were in the wedding party, of course. So were Alex's parents, who had come around years ago and apologized for their initial rejection of him, who had done the work to repair their relationship and prove they deserved to be in his life. The question of whether to invite my family never even came up. That door had been closed for so long that it was not even a door anymore, just a wall with wallpaper over it, part of the permanent structure of my life. The night before the wedding, Riley, Emma, and I stayed up late in my apartment drinking wine and talking about love and loss and everything in between. "Do you ever wonder what they are doing?" Riley asked. "Your family, I mean." "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not in a way that makes me want to reach out. More like you might wonder about characters in a book you read a long time ago. Curious but distant." "Do you think they have changed?" Emma asked. I considered the question. "Maybe. People can change, but it does not matter if they have, because I have changed too. I am not the person who needed their approval anymore. I am not the person who would sacrifice myself to keep them comfortable. And whoever I am now, I like her a lot better." The wedding was beautiful. I walked down the aisle to a song that Alex and I had chosen together, and when I reached the altar and took his hands, I was not thinking about who was missing. I was thinking about everyone who was there. All the people who had shown up for me, who had proven that love was not about biology, but about choice and commitment, and showing up day after day. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, there was only laughter and love in the room. No one was going to ruin this moment. No one had the power to hurt me anymore. 7 years after the graduation party, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Capitol Hill working on a marketing strategy for a new client when I looked up and saw Chloe standing in line at the counter. She looked older, tired, with streaks of gray in her hair that she had not bothered to cover. She was alone staring at her phone, and she had not seen me yet. My first instinct was to leave to avoid the confrontation entirely, but then I realized something I did not need to leave. This was my coffee shop, my neighborhood, my city, my life. If anyone should feel uncomfortable, it was her. So I stayed where I was watching as she ordered her coffee and turned to find a seat. Our eyes met and I saw recognition flash across her face, followed by something that looked like panic. She stood there for a moment, frozen, her coffee cup in hand. I gave her a small nod, polite but distant, the kind of acknowledgement you might give a stranger. Then I looked back down at my laptop and continued working. I could feel her staring at me for another moment, could sense her internal debate about whether to approach, but then I heard her footsteps moving away toward the door, choosing escape over confrontation. When I looked up again, she was gone, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no anger, no sadness. Just a calm, settled sense of indifference. That night, I told Alex about the encounter. "How do you feel?" he asked. "I feel like I ran into someone I used to know," I said. "That is all she is now, someone I used to know." 8 years after the graduation party, Riley and Emma had their first child, a daughter they named Maya. I was chosen as her godmother, a role I took seriously, promising to be the kind of adult presence in her life that I wished I had had growing up. Someone who would see her clearly, support her unconditionally, and never make her feel like her value was tied to her usefulness. Holding baby Maya in the hospital, looking down at her tiny, perfect face, I thought about cycles and how they can be broken. I thought about how the cruelty I experienced did not have to define me or shape how I treated others. I could choose to be different. I could choose to be better. 9 years after the graduation party, I was promoted to Chief Marketing Officer at my firm. It was a title I had worked toward for years, a position that represented not just professional success, but personal triumph. I had built this career without any help from my family, without their connections or their support or their approval. Every step of the way had been mine. At the celebration dinner the company threw for me, Michelle gave a speech about my leadership and integrity. "Harper has a rare quality," she said. "She knows who she is and what she stands for, and she never compromises that even when it would be easier to bend. That kind of authenticity is what makes great leaders." I thought about how the person I was, now the person who had earned that praise, had been forged in the fire of rejection and betrayal. How sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalysts for becoming our best selves. 10 years after the graduation party, I stood in front of a room full of young professionals at a women's leadership conference telling my story. Not all of it, but the important parts. The parts about financial abuse and family exploitation and the courage it takes to walk away. The parts about rebuilding and healing and learning to trust again. "The hardest part is not the leaving," I told them. "It is living with the guilt afterward, because we are taught that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that you should forgive and forget and always give people another chance. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and even for them is to establish a boundary and maintain it. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick." After the talk, a young woman approached me, tears streaming down her face. "I have been making payments on my parents' mortgage for 3 years," she whispered. "I thought I was the only one. I thought I was crazy for being angry about it." I gave her the contact information for my lawyer, for my therapist, for the financial advisor who had helped me rebuild my credit and my savings. I gave her resources and validation, and most importantly, permission to put herself first. "You are not crazy," I told her. "You are not selfish. You are not ungrateful. You are being exploited, and you deserve better." She hugged me, and I hugged her back, and I thought about how many people were out there carrying the same burden I had carried, thinking they were alone. thinking they had to endure it because family was supposed to be everything. 10 years after the graduation party, I sat down at my computer and wrote about my experience publishing it as an essay on Medium. I did not use names, but I did not sugarcoat the reality either. I wrote about the cake on the floor and the laughter that followed me into the darkness. I wrote about the discovery of the loans and the confrontation at my apartment building. I wrote about the long, difficult process of healing and the beautiful life I had built on the other side. The essay went viral. Within days, it had been shared thousands of times with hundreds of comments from people sharing their own stories of family estrangement and financial abuse. I received messages from strangers thanking me for speaking up, for making them feel less alone, for giving them the courage to set their own boundaries. Some people criticized me, of course. They said I was bitter, that I should forgive and move on, that family was too important to throw away over money. But their words did not touch me the way they once would have. I knew my truth. I knew what I had survived, and I knew that the people who had never experienced what I experienced would never understand the choices I had made. Now, as I sit here at my desk in my home office, looking out at the Seattle skyline on this Friday afternoon in November 2025, I think about the question I get asked most often: do you regret it? Do you regret walking away? And the answer is no, not for a single second. Because walking away gave me my life back. It gave me the space to discover who I was without the constant pressure of trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. It gave me the freedom to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. I am not going to tell you that everything is perfect now, that cutting off my family solved all my problems and made me endlessly happy. Healing is not linear. There are still days when I wonder what might have happened if I had tried harder, if I had been more patient, if I had found the right words to make them understand. There are still moments when I see families together in restaurants or parks and feel a pang of loss for something I never really had. But those moments are fewer and farther between now, and they are balanced by so much joy, so much peace, so much genuine love from the people who chose to be in my life and whom I chose in return. My story is not unique. There are thousands, maybe millions of people who have had to make the same impossible choice: stay and be destroyed, or leave and be free. If you are reading this and you are still in that place of indecision, still trying to figure out if you are justified in your anger, still wondering if maybe you are the problem, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me 10 years ago. You are not obligated to maintain relationships that harm you, even if those relationships are with family. You are not selfish for protecting yourself. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not ungrateful for refusing to be used. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. And if the people in your life cannot or will not do that, you have every right to remove yourself from their presence. Walking away does not mean you have failed. It means you have finally succeeded in valuing yourself enough to demand better. So, here is what I want to know from you. Have you ever had to cut ties with family to find yourself? Have you ever been the scapegoat, the one who gave and gave until there was nothing left? Have you ever stood at that crossroads between loyalty and self-preservation? Tell me your story in the comments below. Share this if you know someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because there are more stories coming, more truths being told, more proof that you are not alone in this. Remember, sometimes the family you need is not the one you were born into. Sometimes you have to walk through fire to find your people. Sometimes the greatest act of love is learning to love yourself enough to leave. Welcome home, Harper. Welcome home to everyone who has ever had to choose themselves. You made the right choice. You are exactly where you are supposed to be.